its most elevated form, the construction of tailored garments like a suit relies heavily, and in some cases exclusively, on hand sewing. Now, there are of course routes to constructing these garments that do avoid all that manual labour, and if you're working with a commercial pattern for a suit or what have you, there's every chance that its instructions will lead you down one of them, which is all well and good. If it is your first rodeo, there's really no need for you to be worrying about doing a hand-sewn canvas for your jacket, for instance. Nevertheless, the repertoire of hand-stitch types necessary to do it the good old-fashioned way is actually rather small. And once you got to grips with them, I think you'd be surprised just how well they can transfer to other sewing projects as well. So today I'm going to demonstrate my top 5 tailoring hand stitches, and I'm willing to bet that after I've done so, a fair few of you are never going to look back. Now, this first one you may already know if you've done really any hand sewing at all, but I think it's worth calling attention to it because it can, if you really want it to, fully replace the standard straight stitch on your machine. You know, the one that we use all the time to sew one panel to another. I'm talking about the back stitch. So there isn't an awful lot to the back stitch. Obviously you're going to have your thread and your needle. Secure it by tying a knot at the end, so just wrap it around your finger and pull it through like that, and then you've got your little knot. And the back stitch just goes like so. So you're just gonna take a stitch, whatever stitch length you're going for. You've got your knot there securing it. Having taken that first stitch, you're then gonna go back just to the side of where you came. And on the underside, you're gonna come forward 2 stitch lengths, if you see what I mean. And pull the needle through. Like so. So there's your 1 stitch. And you're just basically going to keep going like that. You're going to go back your 1 stitch length, go forward 2. Obviously, I'm not doing the best job here, but the point stands. And yeah, you're just going to keep going like that. And that is your back stitch. And again, this is a perfect substitute for the straight stitch on your machine. And doing it by hand just gives you a lot more control over what you're doing. And on the reverse side, as you can see, it's just got these double length stitches like that. And that's your back stitch. Next up, we have a true winner, and a stitch that's going to have you feeling more like a proper tailor than you have any right to do. Now, in the tailoring context, you might use a stitch to, among other things, attach the collar pieces together or to secure the body canvas to the lapel. But honestly, it's a super handy stitch anytime you might want to attach one panel of fabric to another across the whole surface area. Say hello to the pad stitch. So the pad stitch, this is a really beautiful stitch and one I'm very fond of. This is how it starts. So again, we've just knotted off our thread at the end. Take a stitch, and again the stitch length can vary. The smaller and the tighter the stitches, the more firm this padding effect will be, and the looser the looser. Yeah. For now, let's just go with something normal looking like this. And the way this stitch works is that you're going to be going up and down in sort of vertical columns, and you're going to be moving the whole time away, as it were, from your dominant hand. So if you're right-handed like me, you're going to be working right to left, and if you're left-handed, like not me, you're going to be working left to right. So anyway, taking the first stitch, and like I say, you're going to then come down vertically. Again, whatever stitch length you're taking, we'll do it relatively generous for now. And you're just going to take another stitch. Oops. Like so. And whatever area you're padding, you're just basically going to keep working down. I'll just do a few. And on this side, which would be, I guess, the sort of the wrong side or the inside, you will have these sort of diagonal stitches like this, while on the reverse side you would have, depending on the size of the stitch you've taken, either sort of small points or little laddery bits like that. So okay, let's say that's the height that I need to traverse. So I've gotten to the bottom of my patch. So just right where I've come out with this last stitch, I'm just going to kind of ever so slightly separated from that, I'm just going to take a back stitch and come across to begin a new column. And then I'm going to work back upwards. But what I'm going to do is, so that I don't have points just on the same level with each other, I'm going to actually only take a sort of half height stitch here at the start, if that makes sense. So rather than going all the way up to the top here and taking a stitch, I'm just going to go halfway up, like so. And then from here, I'm going to carry on with that classic, with that same stitch height as before. And then again here, I'm just going to do a half one at the top as well. And so on and so forth, like that. And yeah, you would just continue like that. And again, if you're, for instance, making a hand-sewn canvas and you're attaching it to the lapel of a jacket, you will be doing lots of these stitches very smallly, and on the underside of the lapel, these points would really just be points. So rather than taking these big stitches I've been taking, you'd be taking tiny little pinpricks like that. And then on the wrong side, or the underside of the lapel, you'd be coming through more like a pinprick like that. Yes, I've got a piece of fabric here on the fold, so there's 2 layers here, and these 2 layers are now joined not just around the edges, say, but across the entire area that I have pad stitched. And again, if I wanted to, I could have done smaller stitches to have it more tightly and less flexibly secured, or conversely looser to make it yet more flexible, but yet still attached and secure in that way. So yeah, I love this one. Up next, we have another paragon of subtlety. This is a stitch that's used to inconspicuously close seams from the outside, and in the construction of a suit really shines in the closing of the lining. It's a slippery one, but it is worthy of your love. It's the slip stitch. So the slip stitch, again, in the tailoring context, is predominantly used for closing the linings. You know, here it was sewed right sides facing, and then it was bagged out so that, you know, the seam is hidden, as it were. But in the construction of a lining, it would often be that you're not doing it that way because you know that you're going to be finishing it by hand. So instead you would have, say, the lining edge folded under, and then you would just need to secure this. And again, the slip stitch is going to do that in a really nice, elegant, and more or less inconspicuous way that is actually going to create the effect as if you were looking at a machine sewed seam like the one I've just shown you from the right side. So yeah, we've got our edge, and again, working sort of from your dominant hand direction away from yourself, if you like, or away from the side of your dominant hand. So you're going to take your first stitch. So starting with this sort of going through the under fabric and coming up through the upper fabric, if you like, and staying really very close to the edge of this folded side. And then you're going to go directly across back to the garment fabric, if you like, to the non-folded side. Take a stitch again very near to that folded edge. And on the underside, you're going to come forward through and come up through, again, the bottom of that folded edge, up through the top, and again, as close really as is reasonable to that edge itself. Just a second, I've got myself entangled. And you just keep going like that. So down, across, underneath. So, you know, in the case of a jacket, you would be basically moving the needle in this sort of between zone of different layers of fabric. So it wouldn't be showing through to the other side. And then like so. So all you're seeing then on the right side are these tiny little, you know, bits of thread, which again is not really that different from if you take a machine stitch seam and sort of pull the panels away from each other a little bit, and you will still then see the, you know, the threads that have been sewn. But you know, this is just a very elegant finish. It's very inconspicuous, more or less as good a job as you could possibly hope to do of closing a seam basically invisibly from the outside. And yeah, gosh, it's very satisfying to do this, I'm not gonna lie. So yeah, there's your slip stitch. These last two really combine the structural with the decorative, and number 4 itself is about as robust as it is snazzy. It's perfect for joining 2 edges while simultaneously smothering any raw fabric ends in sight. It could only be the cross stitch. So with the cross stitch, unlike the previous 2 stitches, you're going to be working away from yourself back towards your dominant stitching hand, basically. And you're going to work with whatever edge it is that you're cross stitching sort of horizontally in front of you. So yeah, again, as before, you've tied off your thread, and you're going to start on the bottom and take, as it were, depending on your hand dominance, from right to left or left to right. So me as right-handed, I'm going right to left. On the bottom edge, just take a horizontal stitch parallel to the edge and come up like that. So there you go, you've started that off. And then you're going to come up diagonally across this edge to the other piece of fabric, and then you're going to take another horizontal stitch like that. And then you're going to come down and work like that. Sort of take another stitch outside of the previous stitch that you've already taken, as it were. So, you know, you're not coming back through here, you're just coming out before where you originally entered, took the stitch. And then you're going to go up and carry on. And now I'm actually going to give you a free 6th stitch, if you like, here. Because there is a variation on this stitch that is even more robust and even more firm, and dare I say, even more attractive. So, as I say, instead of, when we've been coming across, instead of coming between these, you know, the previous stitch that we've done on that side, we've been staying outside. So again, here, if I'm going back up, instead of coming out through here, I'm coming out through here. But with the double cross stitch, you do in fact go all the way back between the the previous stitch on that side, like so. And then when you come back down, you do the same. And what this does is just tighten up the frequency of stitches and make them sort of intersect with each other a bit more genuinely. Ow. And that is basically how it will go. So in the tailoring context, you would use these stitches, these cross stitches and double cross stitches, for instance, to secure down the edges of the collar underneath the collar. So there'll be these little flappy bits sticking out, and you'll fold them under and you'll cross stitch them into the underside of the collar. And also then on the inside of the jacket, on the front pieces, where the jacket facing runs into the hem, so the facing edge is everywhere else covered by the front lining, but for that last little bit before the hem, because the lining doesn't go all the way down to the hem, it needs to be secured down to the hem itself, because otherwise it's just this raw edge that's sticking out. And yeah, in that context too, you would also be cross-stitching it down to secure it. Yeah, and that's basically that. But like I say, beyond the tailoring context, this is a really handy way to just, if you like the sort of embroidered look on your garments, if you just need to like pad down one raw piece of fabric, it will also basically have the function of securing the rawness of the edge, so securing that raw edge, because it will just be enclosed within all these crosses, and it's basically like an overlock. So that's your cross stitch, double cross stitch. Last but by no means least, we have a stitch that is generously used in tailoring to give a decorative finish to all sorts of edges, such as the collar or the jacket fronts, while also helping to lend them some structural definition. What else could it be but the Mona Lisa of top stitches, the pick stitch? Or is it prick stitch? You decide. The pick stitch, or indeed the prick stitch. Who knows what exactly it's meant to be called? It's just one of those things. Okay, so I've prepared here just something that's a bit more resembling something like, again, the outer edge of a collar or a lapel. Just got these two edges, and again, importantly, there is going to be a sort of an inside between all these layers that can hide the thread in. Let's say we're starting here, and again, as with the slip stitch and things like that, we're going to be working in the side, as it were, of our dominant sewing hand and moving away from that side. So again, in my case, right to left. So yeah, I'm going to want to start here and, just sort of a little bit in from the edge. And to do that, instead of knotting the thread or indeed just doing a normal back stitch, I'm actually going to enter just, somewhere away from it and come out kind of where I want to start. The little tail here is about to get lost in the void in between all these layers of fabric. So there it is. That's now hidden within all these layers, and that's not going to be showing anywhere. And I'm not going to pull it any further, so I've got this nice trail of thread to play with. And the reason why I'm doing it that way is because this stitch essentially is just a variation on the back stitch. The only thing is that you're varying the interval of the stitch length. Okay, so I've come out here, and the way this is going to work is I'm going to go back literally just 1 millimeter, 2 millimeters, so that the effect will be a tiny point, and I'm going to back stitch. And again, this is going to serve to secure the thread properly. And I'm going to go through all layers to the other side, incidentally. And yeah, just working with, whatever stitch length is appropriate, whatever, I'll just follow my nose here. I'm going to come forward and pull that. And again, you're not going to pull it super tight. You do not want these stitches to sort of pucker. Certainly within the tailoring context, that is usually a sign that this has been done by machine and not by hand. And again, it's a perfect example of the beauty and the value of hand sewing, is it allows you to gauge how much tension exactly each stitch needs. So I've kind of pulled that one overly tight for just reference, but yeah, you don't want it to be tight or firm or anything like that. Well, you want it to be firm, but you don't want it to be tight. And yeah, so you're just going to then carry on. You're going to go back again, take a stitch, come through that same sort of interval forward, going through all layers, pull it, secure. And again, you're just then going to have these quite attractive little points. And as I said, this is essentially a version of top stitching. So really, literally any time you want to top stitch anything or have to top stitch anything, you can decide whether you'd actually rather have this effect and just do it by hand. Again, there are many machines that will do a version of this, but it won't be quite so nice as what you can do by hand, and it won't be half as fun to do it either. On the other side, it's going to look sort of like a normal straight stitch. And then when it was time to take your last stitch, so let's say this is the last stitch. Again, I apologize for this is very inconsistent, but you know what I mean. You would then go back as before, but rather than going through all the way to the other side, you would kind of mimic what you've done at the beginning with hiding the thread in the middle, just in reverse. So you would then angle through, bring your needle out some way away from that, hiding the thread in between the layers, so this time not coming through to the other side. pull your thread sort of appropriately tight. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna take the thread at this end, this point where it's coming out, and you're just gonna pull it so that it's coming out ever so slightly, pull it and then snip it right where it goes in. And then when that tension sort of bounces back, the thread is gonna go back to inside in between all of these layers. And yeah, and that's what you have, this sort of beautiful pointillist effect. Again, not very beautiful the way I've done it, but that's the way it goes. So there's 5. More than enough to get going, I think, if, like me, you're starting to feel a little bit obsessed by this bewitching craft. Again though, the utility of these stitches isn't limited to just tailoring. Once you have them under your belt, you will see opportunities to use them absolutely everywhere. Like decoratively cross-stitching on a scrap to cover up some felt tip pen, which surprisingly didn't come out in the wash. And I really promise that nothing will get you out of a tricky sewing pickle like a judiciously applied hand stitch. Anyway, if you want to see some of these put into action, you can check out my recent wedding suit series, particularly the final finishing episode, which features such fascinating extras as the buttonhole stitch. Or maybe you're just trepidatious about starting to sew all together. Maybe I can help you with that too.